What's your why? That's what we're covering in this tool shed tool conversation. This is a tool I use 3 times a day for myself. I use it not every conversation with the guys that I guide, but I certainly use it quite a bit. I believe that it is one of the foundational tools that men have been using since the Garden of Eden, and it isn't theoretical. Great men throughout history have used it. During the days like me, I do it 3 times a day. I don't really pray. I never really have gotten into prayer. It's hard for me. It's semantics because I think some people would call this prayer, but I prefer to call it my why. And I say it 3 times a day. Traditionally, Jews would pray for 3 times a day. When I was a rabbi, it was a job hazard. I was supposed to lead public prayer. I just always would struggle with it. And I would shut my eyes and I would say quietly, my why. My why is quite long. It's a few paragraphs. It doesn't need to be. It can be one sentence. It can be multiple sentences, but it has to be articulated. It isn't enough to just have platitudes, right? I want to be a good man and a good dad. Like my why drills down into who I am and what I'm here to do. It's, again, been around forever. And like I said, gotten great men through bad times. One of those men, as I've mentioned in almost every video I've ever done, is Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor, author of Man's Search for Meaning and many other books, and father of logotherapy. I'm a logotherapist. When people ask me what logotherapy is, oftentimes I'll say meaning therapy. That's not what it is. What it is why coaching. Why? Why am I here? Helping people find their way, why, articulate their why, and live their why. So what's your why? You got to figure that out. Now, don't just sit down and write it out. I mean, do that, but really do it and rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it. And it could take you days, months, years, decades. It can change. It can evolve. It will evolve. I would argue that my why is the same that I was when I was 5 and 15 and now 51. Had to remember there. The nature of it is the same. The details change. So the bottom line is we'll have a conversation about how to craft your why. If we work together, we'll certainly do that work. But at the very least, start the process of thinking about why. And once you get at least a first of 5,000 drafts down, memorize it. Commit it to memory. I'm reluctant to share my why with you. It's 3 paragraphs, not because I'm shy about it. I've shared it elsewhere. It just raises the bar too high. And again, it's taken me 20 years of crafting and recrafting and writing it down and memorizing it, but it's mine. You'll find yours. What you need to do is, with this tool, when you feel scattered, right? I was writing the other day, and I found myself writing a blog that nobody wanted to hear and I didn't want to write it. How did I end up there? Because I started with something I wanted to write and people needed to hear. And I ended up 50 permutations later over here. I'd forgotten my why. I'd forgotten I'm not here to write for likes, or I'm not here to just write about what I want. There's this sweet spot of artistry somewhere in the middle, and I just lost it. I had to come back to it. Frankl talks about being a pilot. He was a pilot, hobbyist, and he liked to fly. He talks about how airplanes are off target like 95% of the time, and it's a process called crabbing, I guess, all you pilots out there, to constantly sort of be moving back and forth across that line, the why. You don't stay on your why, on your course, on the trajectory you set out on when you began. But if we don't have our whys, and we'll do other tools that will help us get back to this direction that we meant to fly. If we don't have these things in our arsenal, we just start drifting further and further and further away. Do you know how many guys I've coached and counseled who ended up over here, and over here was their personal hell? I don't know if I believe in hell in the afterlife. I believe in the hell in this life. And this life, hell is having wound up in a dark night of the soul that you didn't design, you didn't mean to end up in. You had choices along the way. Not all dark nights of the soul allow for that, but so many of those dark moments, we end up there like my father, just a series of bad choices or not choosing, as the rock band Rush said, not to choose is a choice. And we don't choose and we drift, and we don't choose and we drift some more. And instead of crabbing and getting back to our flight path, we end up over here. It happens by 1,000 cuts, death by 1,000 cuts, and then you wind up and you say, right, Talking Heads, how many 80s bands can I drop into one tool shed? Tool. The Talking Heads, this is not my beautiful wife, and this is not my life. I forget exactly the words, but letting the days go by, I won't sing it, I'll spare you. And that's how we end up over here, by choosing wrongly or forfeiting our power to choose. And in the end, all we have, said Frankl, is our power to choose our response. If we're in reaction, we're not crabbing, we're drifting. If we're in response, we're coming back to the flight path again and again and again. What's my why as I walk into a business meeting? Right? What's my why as I walk into the bedroom? What's my why as I walk into, fill in the blank, in any situation, in any relationship or not a relationship? I just talked to a guy before he flips on his computer screen and nobody's home and he just wants to get a release and a rush. Like so many men, he goes to a porn site. No moral judgment here. A whole other conversation for that on another day. But for him, and I think most of the time, those types of things are just us leaving our flight path, are in reaction, are forgetting our why. So he wanted to talk about, and this is like a conversation I have with different clients once a week. I mean, it's not insignificant. He wanted to talk about all of the things to stop doing that for him. And what we started talking about is, forget that. Let's just get back to your why. Because if you have a big enough why, you can endure any how. So get back to your why. When your why is big and when your why is clear, those other things, you don't beat yourself up for them. You don't need to even address them. You just need to see past them. We need to have a bigger why so we can endure the how. One last point. Whenever I was counseling as a rabbi people through grief, one of the things I noticed is most grief counselors, most clergy, they forgot an important component. Surviving is not enough. Yes, in the dark days after our loved one dies, we got to survive. We have to just simply endure. Then we get back to a level playing field. Now we need a bigger why than the loss that was taken from us. It doesn't mean you can replace your loved one. You can't and you should not. But it does mean we have to have something bigger that we live for. Now, we give more. We love more fully. We live more fiercely as an act of giving to our loved ones so that we don't die with them, or we don't simply merely survive, because we're not here to survive. But you can only survive if you don't know your why. That is just living in the how. And if you want to thrive, you got to get back to your why. He or she who has a why can endure any how. Go into those situations in your life and know your why and say your why, but at the very least, even if you haven't articulated it yet, simply shift from why to how. What's my why as I walk into that situation? It elevates your consciousness. It takes you out of reaction to response. I'm going to live my why. I'm going to speak my why. I'm going to be my why. And that's the power of why. So take this tool with you out into the world, and as always, defy your number, defy your reaction, choose your response, live your spirit, live your why in this life.